talking about the study of world religion, it's important to think about it within a larger conversation of the colonial imperial model. And so when we start talking about it, we need to be careful that we're not just looking at it as Exhibit A versus Exhibit B and doing this type of comparative framework that's going to bring up some problems that have been discussed within this conversation. And one of the ways that I found that is helpful in dealing with this is looking at the theme of a prime meridian. So when you look at a world map and look at the zero of longitude, the prime meridian, it's an arbitrary line. We've made it up, but at the same time it produces this type of universal reference point that lets us know what is east, what is west, and basically it orients us to time and space. And so this center point, everything has to adjust itself to it, and everything is judged by it. And so the question is, why is this center point in England? Why isn't it in Baghdad or Paris or Beijing or even Minneapolis? And so the question is it a theological choice? Is it a scientific choice? And throughout history, it has been rooted in many different frameworks here. But in the study of world religion, we see that world religion is in and of itself a type of world map. And so our question is, what is the prime meridian of world religion? Where do we start from? What's a center line by which all things are judged? And for example, is there a religion that all other religions need to match up to? And so when we're talking about this, we have to first look at what religion even is. And when we're looking at when the study of world religion began as an actual scientific study, we're talking about the late 19th century, where the definition was essentially asking about, Webster's dictionary actually looked at the perfections of God and how human revelation was given to man and how man's obedience to that God was understood. And so it was a very Christian focus. The prime meridian for Christianity was very central. And so terms are then important. And so this is going to be important to recognize that in this conversation, or in this lecture, we're not trying to do anything comprehensive here. We're just opening up the discussion so that we can see some of the important points. So some of the historical grounding, the study of religion at first was a religious enterprise. We see it undergone by missionaries and ministers whose goal, they were to convert lost souls to Christ. There were terms that were used like infidel, heathen, etc. But what this did was it opened Europeans up to different parts of the world to where they could start thinking about them. Once colonialism came into play, it forced a lot of new cultural artifacts that then became, that these Europeans became aware of. And so interest in other countries, other traditions, and now other religions became of importance. This made it so scholars started to look at this seriously. They started grabbing some of these artifacts such as Sanskrit texts, bringing them back to Oxford, translating them into English, and discovering religion. There were new terms that were utilized rather than infidel or heathen so much. We would now see new terms like primitive or savage. So we still see some of the problematic realities, but at the same time, it's changing. The paradigm is changing. And so colonialism then became very important in bringing a lot of this awareness of Europe to different parts of the world, and also these sacred texts to be translated. And now we see the emergence of a scientific study of comparative religion, as it would be called. A lot of themes emerge with this. For example, religion was seen as an XYZ religion. If you've got the founder and you add to it a Bible, then you have a religion. And so religion had a very specific definition. And so once you have these things understood, then you can add an ism at the end. And so in other words, we have this type of invention of religion where we have Buddhism, Hinduism, Parsiism, and these other types of isms, which implies a type of specific European understanding of what they're making sense of. More to this, in the 1870s, we really start seeing this evolutionary model imposed upon the study of religion. And so this new scientific approach was now looking at, quote, others. And in the 1880s and 1890s, we really see the study of religion developing as a type of organism that can be studied. This essence could be found from within it, And once this essence is understood, we can now compare these different expressions of what was understood to be the same essence. And so scholars were really looking at Christianity, finding the essence within Christianity, and by looking at different traditions, they would ask themselves how well these different traditions compared with Christianity, and therefore how good or bad they were. And if religions looked different, then they would be seen as less evolved or even corrupted versions of this essence. And so even as the field became more critical of religion itself, we still see that this evolutionary model would uphold Christianity as the highest pinnacle of evolution prior to coming into this scientific awareness. And so they would look at these superstitious traditions that would then emerge or evolve into religious traditions that would then emerge or evolve into scientific advances. And so they very much saw themselves as the pinnacle of this. And when they would look at these other traditions, other texts, other communities, ethnicities, etc., they were really seeing themselves looking in a time machine, that they could see who they once were by looking at these different groups. And so we see the study of religion was very much rooted into a type of white supremacist, Christocentric vision of the world. It was very much part of the colonial model. In fact, colonialism adopted a lot of these models to justify colonizing other groups. For example, when you have the word religion, it was synonymous with Christianity, which was synonymous with civilization. And if where they were going to, for example, in India, these people, if they weren't Christian, if it didn't look like Christianity, then therefore they weren't civilized, therefore we need to be benevolent and bring civilization to them by way of colonial paternal benevolence. In the 1900s, we're starting to see this rooted more from no longer just a theory rooted in evolution, but now a type of internationally secure atmosphere of the study of religion. By the 1930s, we see we see chairs in comparative religion in places like Netherlands, France, Denmark, Germany, Sweden. So throughout much of Europe, we're starting to see the emergence of the actual scientific study of religion. And in this, Christianity was the prime meridian, and all other religions were compared to how well they looked to that. And so with these different scientific rules that were then imposed on this, it was really looking at our best versus their worst. Comparison was never an innocent endeavor. And in other words, by seeing our tallness, we can see their shortness. Our beauty, we can see their, or if we look at their ugliness, we can see our own beauty. And you actually see this in a lot of the texts that we're talking about different religions. So there's this image that I wanted to look at real quick, which you can see this model in a pictorial form, which I think is very instructive. And this is coming from the World Parliament of Religion in 1893 in Chicago. Puck magazine does this image where we see this towering Uncle Sam here in the middle, and representing white Protestant America, whereas we see holding right next to him Protestant Germany and Protestant Great Britain. A little further out we see Roman Catholic Italy and Roman Catholic Spain. A little further out, on the margins we see pagan Africa and idolatrous China. And so you can see very much how race is very much part of this this whole schema of world religion. And this comparative model then upholds Christianity as this iconic white male Protestant figure being cheered by the rest of the world for their ability to lead the world. And Christianity is very clearly then the prime meridian, and such leadership is considered to be natural within this. And one thing I wanted to mention, though, at the end of this is how America dealt with this. You have the World Parliament of Religion at the World's Fair of 1893 in Chicago that wanted to put its foot into the whole study of world religion. One thing to remember is that the first textbook of world religion wasn't published until 1891. Here, just a few years later, in fact, it's in 1891 that the World Parliament is being first organized. And here, this becomes the first world gathering or ecumenical gathering of world religions, to where all religions ideally were to come and express, as the invitations put it, their own faith. So again, you can kind of see this Christocentric focus on faith, and God became the focus, and to find out what other religions think about God. And this event was 17 days long. Speaker after speaker talked about their own sense of religion and progress. And with Christianity as this prime meridian, they had to adjust themselves and speak to how they can make sense of Christianity, or make sense of their own religion within this Christocentric environment. And so following this world religion paradigm, many were asked to speak on the founders or their Bibles. Also, we see any deviations of this. We'd see other speakers talk about Buddhism, for example. Since it didn't look exactly like Christianity, it was a type of devolution. Once they had the truth of God, but that had evolved into something different. In fact, they would be looking at these texts that were translated into English, of these ancient Buddhist texts, and they would be looking at how Buddhists, what they were doing was looking different than what they understood from these so-called Buddhist Bibles. And so what they understood was these scholars understood Buddhism better than these Buddhists themselves did. And so you can kind of see how this model was imposed on the rest of the world in this way. And so this was very much a largely Christian ecumenical enterprise. But we see at the same time, different groups were invited and they were asked to speak about their religions. And so many of them did. And they spoke about how the word religion doesn't apply, as we see with one Hindu delegate. Another Hindu delegate talked about how Christianity itself did not monopolize truth and righteousness. We also see a Buddhist delegate come and talk about how imposing Christianity in Japan has been very oppressive and very much not Christian, and as he put it, we're very much happy being heathens in that respect. We also see critiques from an African American delegate who talked about the racial ideas of Christianity were problematic, and also we see a female delegate talking about male supremacy in religion as also being problematic. So something's happening here. Even though we have this problematic colonial imperialist type of approach to world religion, when we have other voices coming to speak, we see that being challenged and problematized, which becomes important, and I think also gives us a key how we can start to look at world religion in a more responsible way. In other words, by listening to traditions that have been traditionally marginalized within the study. It can be at least a beginning. And to bring it all together, we see that the study of world religion then is not just one map with one prime meridian, but instead we see world religion as many maps with their own prime meridians. And so as a study of religion, we need to then set aside our own sense of a prime meridian, whatever that may be, and allow another person to speak of theirs, another group or community. And also to be aware of the own prejudices that come with terms like the study of world religion. Also to be aware of the Christian origins of the word religion itself, and even world religion as a paradigm, and start looking at Islam as a deen, or Hinduism as a dharma, and start to look at different terms and different terminology. So the study of religion is not just a study of religion per se, but an ability to enter into a new conversation about how global diversity then can be better understood. And so to critically engage our own vocabulary, our own moral assumptions, in other words, our own prime meridians. And so we see the study of world religion, that there's no essence that we can really find, but instead a multiplicity of different expressions that can then be studied. And so the study of world religion is more of an opportunity to listen to what is unfamiliar and to critically engage in our own prime meridians, and as one scholar has mentioned, to make the familiar strange and the strange more familiar.